Greetings everyone, this is Rob Sanders from Simplilearn, and today we're going to talk about how to set up event tracking in Google Analytics. So welcome and let's get started. So many of you out there have a website similar to the one I'm looking at now. This is a nonprofit that I work with, I'm a foundation, and like this website and probably like your website, you probably have some interactivity on there that needs to be tracked. For example, buttons. If you have buttons like this one that says donate or newsletter sign up, or there's a PDF download or a video that needs to be, tracked based on the amount of people who click on the play button. So, all sorts of interactivity on a website. Have you ever wondered how to track that? Well, there is a way to track that because by default, Google Analytics can't track interactivity and engagement on your website like you probably want to have your website tracked. So if you have buttons and videos and things of that nature that you want to have tracked, well, you're going to need event tracking. And if you're in analytics and you're always wandering around the data and you happen to find yourself under events, well, if you want events on your website and you want data to populate under behavior top events, you're going to need to set up event tracking. So event tracking is a two-part process. And we're going to talk about that two-part process. The first part of that is to identify what you want to track. Okay, so if we go back to our example website here, I'm a foundation. Again, we noted there's a lot to track here. We got a donate now button, we got a newsletter sign up, we have some social icons. Okay, we got a donate now button here, we got a play button here, we got all sorts of interactivity. We got a button here that says, purchase tickets for an upcoming event. I can go throughout the website and find different buttons and things to track. Let me just say this, there's no shortage of what you can track on your website with event tracking. So event tracking is just basically, in layman's terms, tracking engagement on your site. Because Google Analytics by default is only going to track page view data, meaning how somebody got to your website, what page they looked at, how long they stayed on that page, what page they left from. More or less, they're timing how long somebody stays on the website and what pages they look at. So there's more to a website than just how long somebody stayed on a page. And so in this example, we want to be able to track everything here, not just the donate now button, but everything, because once you get the hang of event tracking, then it's very easy to set up. Okay, so step one, identify what you want to track. Okay, so there's a lot we want to track. We're just going to use one example to start off with, and that's going to be this donate now button. Okay, so this donate now button we want to track. Now we have a newsletter sign up, we have Facebook, and that's fine, you could track all that, but for the sake of going through a step-by-step process today, let's just focus on the donate now button. Let's focus on the donate now button, then we'll come back and start tracking these other things, but this is what we want to track to start out with. Okay, so step one, identify what you want to track. Now, when it comes to tracking events on a website, you want to identify those events. So we did that by choosing this donate now button. Now, once we identify what we want to track, we need to assign two parameters for that event. So with event tracking, you have three parameters, but one is actually optional. So you have two mandatory parameters that you have to assign to everything you want to track on your website. And that's the category and then the action. So event label is the third parameter, but again, that's optional. Okay, so basically, when we identify an event on our website, we want to assign it a category and an action. Okay, so why do we want to assign it a category and an action? Because when we're in analytics, under behavior, under events, top events, we could see we have different categories here. And we have different actions, we have different labels. So if I click on any one of these dimensions, I'm going to be able to see some of the parameters I've entered in for previous events I'm tracking. Okay, so the whole idea is you want to be able to group different events together into a category and assign an action and assign a label to it. That's really what you're doing. You're just grouping and identifying the events you're trying to track. And so in this case, I have this donate now button sitting in the header. Okay, in fact, I have a lot of things sitting in the header. So if I wanted to, and I want to track all these buttons, I can create a category called header. And then if I track all these buttons can sit in that same category if I wanted to. Or I can create a separate category for each of these buttons. It's up to you how you organize your categories, because basically all you're doing is giving a name to what you're trying to track. And the name is equivalent to a category. So in this case, the Donate Now button is very important. I'm just going to call it Category Header Donate. Now, I need to give an action to each category. And so in this case, I'm just going to say click, because that's what the action is doing. It's somebody's taking the action of clicking. Now, if it's a video and it's a play button, I can assign an action of play. It's up to you whatever you name these parameters. You just need to be organized and methodical about what you name it. That's all. And so in this case, header donate and then click. Okay, and so that's our category in action. And so that's really step 2. So step 1, identify what you want to track. Step 2, assign a category, action, and or label. But remember, label is optional. So if I go back in analytics here, I could see some categories. And if I click on action, I could see some actions that I've named. Now, step 3. So we've identified in step 1 what we want to track. We've assigned a category and action. So step 3 is going into Google Tag Manager to set up the event. Okay, so if you're not familiar with Google Tag Manager, then you can easily just do a Google search for Google Tag Manager, and basically you'll have all sorts of information on it. There's a good video overview of Tag Manager here that you can watch. So Tag Manager basically is what we want to use to set up event tracking. Now, Tag Manager is used for a lot of different things, but the main thing we're doing here is setting up an event for our website. And so I'm logged in to the same email address I'm using for analytics. Okay, so now I'm in Tag Manager and I want to set up my event for this Donate Now button. So what do I need to do? Well, for every event I want to set up, I need to set up a tag. Okay, so if I go to tags, I can see I already have some tags set up, and some of these are events. And so when you actually set up a tag, I recommend having a naming convention. So here you can see any event we set up, we start out by calling it GA-event- whatever it is we're trying to set up. And so in this case, we want to set up a new tag for the Donate Now button on our website. So we're in Google Tag Manager, because Tag Manager is what's going to fire that event. So if I click on New, okay, and I click on Tag Configuration, I'm going to choose Google Analytics. And then I'm going to choose Event as my track type. So we want the data to show up in Google Analytics, and we're tracking an event. We're not tracking a page view, we're tracking an event. And so now, remember in step 2, you identified what you want to call that category, you identify what you want to call that action, and you have some optional parameters like label. So first things first, header donates the name of our category, and our action is click. And if you want to add in a label and a value, so if you want to assign a value, you can. If you want to add in a label, you can. Okay, those are optional. So you just need to focus on category and action. And then the last setting here that's probably worth mentioning is a non-interaction hit. Okay, so this is automatically set to false. And why is it set to false? Because it's a non-interaction? No, that's false. We want this event, if somebody clicks on the header donate, to be an interaction. So for example, if I land on this page here and I click on that Donate Now button that I'm tracking as an event, and I actually leave the site, because I have my settings set to false, I want that click to be an interaction, then analytics is not going to count a bounce. If I change it to true, so from false to true, then that means it is going to be a non-interaction if somebody lands on the page and if somebody clicks on the button. So I don't want it to be a bounce. I want it to be an interaction. So my advice is leave it set to false. We're going to choose Google Analytics as our setting here. This is our variable for Google Analytics. So in other words, that variable is set to our analytics property ID. And more or less, that's what you need to do to set up the tag, okay? You need to, in step 2, identify the category and action, and or label, and or value. Now, value can be anything you want. You're assigning a numerical value, so if you just assign 1, anytime that event fires in analytics, it's going to have a value of 1. Okay, and so we have our non-interaction set to false, so anytime the event fires, it's going to count as an interaction and therefore not count as a bounce if somebody landed on that page. So that's more or less all you need to do to set up the tag in Google Tag Manager. Now, if somebody else is setting up the tag for you, then again, you want to revert to step 2. You want to be able to give that person the appropriate category, action, and or label, and or value. Why? Because you're the one that's going to be going into Google Analytics, and you're the one that's going to have to go to behavior, events, top events, and look for the particular category and action and or label. So you need to be able to communicate that information to whomever is setting up the tag. Now, if it's you, great. You already know what it is because you're entering that information into Tag Manager. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and choose a variable for my label parameter. And why do I want to do that? Because in Tag Manager, I have something at my disposal called variables. And variables allow you to see specifically things that are being tracked. So in this case, I chose page path. Okay, so page path is a URL. And why did I choose page path as my variable for the parameter label? Because if somebody does click on the header donate button, and the header donate button on our website is on every page. So if I go to the children's page, I'm still going to see that header donate button. And so for me, I want to be able to see what page somebody clicked on that header donate button. And so this allows me to actually see in Google Analytics what page somebody clicked on the header donate now button. And so now if I go back to GTM, Google Tag Manager, I have a category, I have an action, and I have a label, which is a variable. Okay, so note that in Google Tag Manager, you have a lot of different variables at your disposal. And variables are there to help you identify specifically what is being tracked. So take a look at all the variables at your disposal in Tag Manager. In this example, I'm using page path. So now, once you set up your tag, pretty straightforward. Again, tag types, Google Analytics. Track type is event. You are assigning the category, action, and or label, and or value. You're changing or leaving the default in place for non-interaction hit. And then you're choosing the variable for Google Analytics, which is your property ID. So once you've done that, you have a tag. The second part of setting up a tag is to assign a trigger to that tag. So Tag Manager needs to be able to know when to fire that event. And so here I'm going to look at a trigger I've already set up for this particular event. And so if I click on it, I'll be able to see that what it is a click on some links, not all links, but some links. I'm actually saying, hey, Google Tag Manager, fire this event when the click ID equals header donate button. Now, it just so happens that if somebody did click on this donate now button, they're going to go to another website. In this case, networkforgood.com. So in Tag Manager, I could have set the trigger to equal URL equal, instead of click ID, I could have said URL equal networkforgood.com. So that could have been my logic for my trigger. In this case, I decided to go with the click ID. And so in this case, that button has an ID associated with it called header donate button. So if you wanted to use click ID for your event, for your button, you could simply just go to the website. You can right click on that button and click inspect element. And so when I actually inspect the element, I can see now the button here. You can see it's highlighted in the upper pane and in the lower pane. I can see where it's linking to. It's linking to networkforgood.com. But here you can see if I hone in a little, I could see ID equals header dash donate dash button. So that's the click ID. Notice there's also a class. I could have set the trigger to equal this class. Or again, I could have set the trigger to equal the URL or the page that this button is pointing to. I could have chosen any one of those, but I decided to go with the ID. So this is the ID I chose, and that's the ID I have in my trigger. Okay, so that is what's going to fire that event. So if somebody clicks on a button that equals header dash donate dash button, it's going to fire that event, which is going to equal category header donate action click, and then the label is going to be page path. So now that we've set up our event, we want to test to see if it actually works. So there's two ways to go about testing an event. And the first way is through Google Analytics. So if we go to Google Analytics and then we go to real time, okay, we can go to events, and here you can see one is already fired. So let's go ahead and go to and test this and go to the website. So if I go here, for example, and I click on Amagar Alumni. Okay, so if I click on that, you can see I'm under our family. And if I click on that button, then go back to analytics and look at real time, I should be able to see this event fire. So if I click on it, I'm going to go to network for good. Now if I go back to analytics, here in real time, under events, per second, I can see that event firing. Category equals header donate. The action equals click. Now if I click on the category, here I can see the label. The label, remember, was page path. And here you could see this event fired on the Our Family page, which was the page I was just on. So that's one way to test to see if your event works. And in this case, analytics recognized the event, so it works, it fired, and so therefore it's going to show up under behavior, under events. You can go under overview or top events. Okay, and what am I going to look for? In this case, I'm going to look for header donate. Okay, if I click on header donate as my category, I'm going to be able to see my action. And if I click on action, I'll be able to see my label. In this case, homepage. And then later on, when the data propagates in analytics, I'll be able to see under label the page that I clicked on that header donate button, which is /ourfamily. Okay, the second way in which you can test to see if an event fires is if you preview. So if I click on preview in Tag Manager, okay, I'm going to go into preview mode. Okay, and preview mode allows you to see in analytics, in Tag Manager, and on the website what tags are firing. So here I could see I'm in preview mode now. So I'm going to go to the website and I'm going to refresh, and in my browser, same browser I'm using for Tag Manager, I can see the tags that are being fired on this page already. Okay, because I'm in preview mode. So here I could see remarketing, I could see page views, I could see Google Optimize, I could see some tags that are already firing on this page. Now, if I click on this button here by holding down my Shift command and then click on that button, I'll be able to see that the tag fired in preview mode. There's my event, header donate, and I can see it fired. So now I can see it fired in the preview mode. So in addition to Google Analytics, in preview mode, I can see that that tag is fired, and I know that it's working. So there you have it. You have two ways to test to see if the event fires. Again, you have real time and analytics. Okay, so in real time, if you just go up to real time, all you need to do is go down to events, go to your website, click on the button. If you see it firing in real time, then you know it works. The second version or second way to test your event is through the preview mode. Okay, if you see it firing in preview mode, then you know it's also working. Okay, so let's rehash our steps. First step is we want to be able to identify what we want to track. Okay, so it could be this newsletter sign up, it could be click on a Facebook, it could be anything we want to be able to track. An image, a click on a CTA button, whatever we want to track, identify it. Second step, identify the category, action, and label, because that's what's going to show up in Google Analytics. Remember, label is optional, value is optional. Third step, go into Tag Manager, actually set up your tag and your trigger. So if you set up a tag and it's an event, name it GA-event. So that way you can see in your list of tags in Tag Manager what event tracking you have already set up. So when you set up your tag, you set up your trigger. Your trigger is based on logic. That can be a URL, it can be a click ID, it can be a class ID, whatever you want to use to fire that event. And then once you do that, you want to test it. You could test it in GTM or you could test it in Google Analytics. If it doesn't fire, you want to tweak your trigger. If it does fire, then great. And then one thing I would recommend is if you're setting up various events for your website, that's a best practice. What I would recommend is set up a spreadsheet. And in that spreadsheet, you want to put a note. What's firing? What are you doing to fire? It could be, in this case, when somebody clicks on the Donate Now button in the header. You want to put the tag name in here, the type. Okay, then you want to record your category, action, and label. And then the great thing about events is you could turn those events into goals. And that's as simple as going back into Analytics. Okay, so if I go in Analytics and I go to Admin and I go to Goals, if you set up a new goal, okay, all you need to do is choose Custom, click Continue. You're going to choose Event as your goal name. And then from a naming perspective in Google Analytics for your goal, I would definitely put event first and then click on header donate. Okay, so if I click now continue, what is my category? It's equal to header donate. My action is click. And so I can verify to see if this is working. And here I can see in Analytics that the goal would have a 0.22% conversion rate. So that tells me that the goal is working and I can turn this event into a goal. And when you turn something into a goal in Analytics, then you can measure it across all dimensions. That's what I would recommend if the event is equal to a KPI or business goal, or it's of importance. It's something you really want to measure. Okay, if it's just a click, say on a Facebook button, I wouldn't recommend setting that up as a goal. Okay, so once you've set up your event, you recorded it in your spreadsheet, it's firing, you want to be able to then go back into behavior, back into events. Okay, you can go to top events. Okay, so top events tell you by category as a default what events are firing or what category is firing the most. Okay, so if I choose my date range, here I can just go to year to date. So here I can see my header donate button, fortunately for me, has the most total events. Now notice in Analytics, you'll also see unique events. And so the difference between unique events and total events is that unique events are equivalent to one per session, where total events means that somebody can come to your website, initiate a session, and click on that button multiple times in the same session. So if I go to the Alma Foundation website, okay, I can click on that Donate Now button 3 or 4 or 5 different times in the same session. So what Analytics is going to do is actually, in that session, count it once, but accumulate the number of clicks as a total event for that session. So you're always going to have more total events than unique events, because in some cases, users may click on the button more than once in the same session. And so here I can see total events, unique events, and if I added a value to that event, I should be able to see it here. So if I added $1 as an example to this particular event, because it had 164 unique events, I should be able to see 164 as my value. But since I see 0, that means that I did not assign value. And so average value basically is just giving me how much average I have per event. So it's taking into account the number of, or the value, the total value divided by the total number of unique page views or sessions. And so because I don't have value, I'm not going to have average value. But here you could see, because value is optional. Here I can at least see how many events or how many clicks I receive for a particular button. Again, it could be a video. If I clicked on this video as an example, I can see how many people actually started it. I can see the unique and the total events. And if I click on label, if I have a label assigned, then I'll be able to see what page triggered that event. So if we go back again to our header donate button, back to category, if we click on label as our primary dimension, here we can see the home page had the most unique events, then followed by the children's page, the contact form, etc. So what you can do in analytics, you can also look at the pages that have driven events. So here I could see the home page has accumulated the most total events, followed by the contact us. So that's how you would look at the data in Google Analytics. Under behavior, under events, and then under top events or overview is where you can start analyzing your event tracking. So first you need to do, identify it, assign a category, action, and or label, set up that tag and trigger. Once you do that, once you test that it's working, this is where you're going to go to analyze the data. So if you need more information on Google Tag Manager, I just briefly showed you how to set up an event and how to look for an event in Google Analytics. So if you need more information, check out this YouTube video we have on Google Tag Manager. It'll give you all the direct insights into what Tag Manager is all about. It even talks a little bit more about event tracking. So thank you for paying attention. If you have any comments about anything we talked about today regarding event tracking or Google Analytics or Google Tag Manager, feel free to leave a comment under this video. If you need more information, please visit Simplilearn.com. Thank you again.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.